I'm going to read you the message my friend sent me regarding this book and its author. This is the highlight of German Gothic literature. This is the greatest unknown/underrated writer ever. A pioneer for silent films, an occultist, a traveler, an adventurer, a beauty model, a poet, a dandy, a drug addict. He was a friend of Crowley, he consumed human flesh with a tribe, and much more. This is your ticket to the opium-soaked German Gothic underground of the early 20th century. Take the ride. So I did.
Better than food, man.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Cliff Sargent, and I'm drinking coffee after dark and making bad decisions. Hope you're doing well. Great to see you, as always. I wanted to get something out sooner for Halloween because this is definitely for that season, but I got very busy, so hopefully you're still in the mood. Alrone is a German Gothic novel by Hans Heinz Evers, who is called the Stephen King of the Wilhelmina Empire. I've linked to that article in the description box below, but it is in German, so you'll have to click the Google Translate button like I did if you can't read German. Regardless, there's a lot of interesting information. This was published in 1912 and it sold 500,000 copies during Evers' lifetime. It's kind of an homage to Frankenstein, but this time it's with a female creation. And it's built around the myth from the Middle Ages of the Alrone, which is German for mandrake, you know, the myth of the mandrake root. Evers seems to have been a very popular author while he was alive, but then drifted into obscurity because of his association with the Nazis. He was a Nazi at one point. He did join them. However, he fell out of favor because he was bisexual and disagreed with their anti-Semitism and wrote crazy novels. Evers' last lover was half Jewish. The Nazis eventually burned his books. He was also placed on a kill list after the Night of the Long Knives, where the Nazi party killed those who were no longer useful to their cause. But Evers was outside the country. He was able to have his name removed from said list. It's speculated because of his still having friends inside the party. So I think that's probably why you haven't heard of him, because he was technically a Nazi. He also helped his German Jewish friends to get exit visas to escape. So his books were burned twice, in both world wars, the first and the second. How many authors can say that? So this one seems to be his most famous, his most popular. A wealthy German scientist is convinced by his rakish nephew, Frank Brown, a recurring alter ego of Evers in his novels, to try an experiment. Their goal is to carry out the first successful case of artificial insemination, but in the style of the legend of the Alrone. So pour yourself a glass of something strong and listen to the myth of the Alrone. Early in the Middle Ages, as a result of the Crusades, the German Alrone legend began to develop. The criminal stripped naked as a pair of tongs and hanged at the crossroads, lost, so the story goes, his final seed, the moment his neck was broken. This seed falls to the ground and there germinates. Thence results an Alrone, a mandrake root. Either a little man or a little woman. Night was the time to dig it out. At 12 o'clock sharp the spade was to bite into the earth beneath the gallows. It was well to stuff one's ears with wool and wax, for when the mannequin was torn from its earthen womb, it screamed so gruesomely that one was like to swoon of fright. Shakespeare mentions that legend. The root creature was then to be taken home carefully, given a bite to eat at every meal, and washed in wine on Sabbath eves. It brought luck in lawsuits and in war, served as an amulet against witchcraft, and drew money into the house. He who had an Alrone was beloved by all folk. It could be used in prophesying, was most valuable to women, for it made them irresistible to men, and in addition ensured fertility and an easy confinement. With all that, the mannequin was nevertheless a creator of pain and misfortune. All the other members of the house were hounded by ill luck, and the possessor himself was led into avarice, lechery, and criminality. In the end, it brought its owner to a miserable death and sent his soul to hell. So Frank Brown's like, let's do it. And yeah, that's basically what happens. So this nephew of dubious reputation eventually convinces his dissolute uncle to carry out the experiment. They find a prostitute in the bars of Berlin and they impregnate her with the seed of a recently executed criminal. And eventually a little baby is born, but the mother dies during childbirth. The result of this experiment is a soulless girl, who they name Alrone, a witch, whom many fall in love with, and those who do are destroyed. She has no moral conscience, but her influence on people around her is profound. She's cold, sadistic, and evil. She's kind of like a siren, which is interesting because the myth of the mandrake root has that whole thing about, it screams so loud that if you don't have earplugs in, it'll kill you. While she makes her father, the uncle, rich through her magical powers, she gradually destroys all of those who fall in love with her, men and women, and eventually the uncle himself. And finally, his nephew, Frank Brown, succumbs to the obsession. Except with him, for some reason, he's different, and she begins experiencing something akin to real love, of course. It's the kind of personality of Evers, right? You know, his alter ego character. He's an egotistical dandy. He's like a mixture between like Oscar Wilde, Aleister Crowley, and Klaus Kinski. I think Klaus Kinski would have done a damn fine job in the Evers biopic. You know, just somebody who's like this adventurous, like megalomaniac. I don't know. You know, that's like the impression I get. But he's just such a character, you know, he's just such a weirdo. The story of his life is better than the book, for sure. This is a really standard Gothic novel. This is just pretty straightforward. I mean, there's a lot of things in here that were probably really influential, and Lovecraft was inspired by him. And so, you know, I wonder if, you know, this was actually setting a lot of things in stone that eventually became cliches. Alrona is very different from the Frankenstein monster, who seems to want to connect in this kind of existential way, to just feel human. And in a way, that's Alrona's problem as well. But everyone is attracted to her, and it seems as if she almost can't help but lead them to their doom. You know, like it's just her nature, right? Combine this with the idea of eugenics, and you have a very interesting horror story built around the idea of identity. It reads like a German Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, or The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. Some parts are extremely floral. It's a little purple, if you get my drift. It's really fucking purple. But it's got some good stuff. When the pale night has fallen, then the basilisk comes slinking by. It is he who in a most curious fashion was fathered by the cold moon, eternal spirit of infertility, and mothered by the arid sand herself, no less infertile than the moon. He is the secret of the desert. Some say he is an animal, but that is not true. He is a thought, and he grew up suddenly, where there was neither earth nor seed. He is a thought, sprung out of envious eternal infertility, and he must therefore take on a chaotic form, unknown to orderly life. And that is why no one can describe this creature, for he is as indescribable as nothingness itself. I'd much rather read it in the original German. I wish I could read German. If you can, I highly suggest you do that. I think it would really help. I think it would be a different story. You know, again, because of the Nazi factor, you know, this wasn't really translated, or there wasn't a demand for this to be translated or retranslated or have, you know, be updated or republished very much. I wonder if it was actually edited. I'm not sure. I don't have any reason to believe that, other than, you know, when I read the synopsis, I was like, wow, this is going to be totally outrageously sexually transgressive and crazy. But no, it's actually very tame. It's far more tame than I expected. And it's more of a dark fairy tale. It's the conception of the Alrona is like the most outrageous part. It's way more Angela Carter than it is Georges Bataille. Evers himself is even more interesting than the book. There's all sorts of crazy connections and relationships and incidents in his life. His history is insane. He told a woman named Maria Monk that he was going to marry her, and then he seems to have changed his mind or stalled, and she killed herself, a young girl. And there's a couple of portraits of her. One alive and then one in her coffin, I think, by Gustav Klimt, as I think Klimt knew her parents and knew Evers. At one point, Evers also traveled to Mexico, met Francisco Pancho Villa, one of the main figures of the Mexican Revolution, and encouraged him to attack the U.S. to try and keep them from entering World War I. What? You know, it's like, that's insane. Evers also influenced H.P. Lovecraft and was friends with Aleister Crowley. So, a boring life he did not lead. And yes, he was also bisexual. And yes, he was also a Nazi later in his life. Apparently, he thought of himself as androgynous. And the theme of androgyny can be seen in Alrona, where she is constantly dressing up in these male costumes. One of the better scenes of the book is where she leads one of her male victims, this guy who's totally obsessed with her, to this party. And they're both dressed up as the opposite sex. And before she kills him, she insists on kissing him as a man. And so if you can put this image in your head, it's very, very interesting, especially given the time. I mean, 1912. It's just like pretty outrageous. Maybe it was like there are some things in there that are just way more outrageous for the time, right? Pretty scandalous and shocking at that era, but you know, now we're sort of like, you know, whatever. But Evers was trying to push all kinds of buttons. He was a complete troublemaker. That thing about Pancho Villa and the Mexican Revolution, that's just insane. I can't even wrap my head around that one, but it's a hell of an interesting story, both of them. So, highly recommended. Better Than Food. Included in this edition are some illustrations by a fellow named Malin Blaine, and as you can see, they're really awesome. There have been something like 5 film adaptations of this book, 2 of them which I've linked to in the description box below. You'll recognize the woman who plays Aurora in the 1927 version, because she's the woman from Fritz Lang's Metropolis, Maria the Robot, you know, the one who has the killer dance moves. If you haven't seen it, just watch this scene with her dancing. It's pretty unforgettable. Evers was apparently a pioneer in cinema, or at least played a significant part. He wrote the script for what is considered the first independent film and the first German art film, The Student of Prague, made in 1913. Evers based it loosely on a story by Edgar Allan Poe. I haven't seen The Student of Prague, but it seems to hint at what's to come with German Expressionism, like Nosferatu and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And to finish up here, this is from a great article by John Hershorn Smith at Sidereal Press. This was a person who saw the potential of film almost immediately, and, it could be argued, pioneered performance art in his utilization of the stage. He synthesized within himself, via whatever means he could, a heady mix of politics, occultism, psychology, and a deep identification of his nation's past, and projected these out to the public in as many forms as he could. In effect, he was a multimedia artist. Like artists today, he understood the advantages to be gained by shock value, and also, as today, lived with the consequences of those actions. So who should read it? Anyone who loves Edgar Allan Poe, Baudelaire. I haven't read them yet, but I imagine if you like Goethe or Oscar Wilde, you may enjoy this. If you like outsider art, weird fiction, witchcraft, magic, anyone interested in the occult or Crowley or Lovecraft or German Expressionism. And if you're interested more in German Expressionism and the silent film and Evers connection, then check out this article I've linked to in the description box below. I thought this guy did a good job. So who's gonna get it for the coffee lottery? For those of you who are new, the Coffee Lottery is where I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have been kind enough to donate $5 or more per video, and I place their names in this mason jar. I pull out a name for every review I do, and whoever's name I pull out, they are sent a hard copy of the book that I'm reviewing, and a bag of coffee roasted by yours truly. And it's delicious coffee. I'm drinking it right now. It's an Ethiopian, I think. And if you would like to get in on that, you can head over to patreon.com/booksarbetterthanfood and donate, again, $5 or more per video. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much to the patrons who have supported the show, and good luck to all of you. And thank you, Eric, for sending me this book. Here we go. Robert. Thanks a bunch, Robert. Really appreciate all the support. You're going to receive Aurora and some delicious coffee. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Always remember, die reading. All right. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.